Hello, everyone. My name is Leah Vachani. I am your holistic health and hormone coach, and also the host of the Women Aging Powerfully podcast, where we bring in amazing experts and ask them all sorts of questions, things you absolutely want to know if you are a woman over 40 and you want to age powerfully. So today I have the lovely Allie Damron. And Allie, I'm so excited to have you back. I've interviewed you before and I really enjoyed it. So, welcome back.
Thanks so much for having me. I love being here.
And I love you have just so much depth and knowledge to share. So, before we dive in about our topic today, I want to tell people a little bit about you.
Yeah.
So, Allie is a wife and a mother to two sweet little boys, as well as a hormone expert, licensed acupuncturist, and certified personal trainer. She has a virtual practice where she helps women balance their hormones and have better moods, sleep, periods, and energy levels. And you can connect with Allie in several different ways. She has one-to-one with patients. She has digital courses. She has a podcast herself called The Allie Damron Show, and of course, a YouTube channel. And we'll be sure to list all of those beautiful ways to connect with Allie in the show notes. So, Allie, I am so excited to ask you a lot of questions
Yeah,
today.
absolutely. Thanks so much.
So, I think today is a really interesting topic. We're going to talk about the nervous system and how it pertains to especially women in peri and menopause. And I think what I would love to talk about first is, these words like stress and cortisol and burnout and even like nervous system, they're thrown around so
Yeah.
frequently these days that I think sometimes people are like, oh, yeah, I know I have to deal with my nervous system. I have to deal with stress. But like, let's dive into that. Why do women, especially women 40 and over, need to really hone in on this?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I do think that those words are just like willy-nilly kind of thrown around. And I see all kinds of things for functional medicine or hormones or weight loss where they're like, oh yeah, manage your stress. But like that's a huge topic and nobody knows what that means. So, number one, it's important to manage stress because when we are under air quote stress, our body is producing more cortisol and adrenaline. And when it's in fight or flight, producing way too much stress hormone way too much of the time, your body starts to compensate for that. So it starts to do things like steal your hormones. So in women over 40, we're in perimenopause already, and progesterone's a hormone that really dictates the menstrual cycle and how we feel. And cortisol and adrenaline really steal that hormone. It can start to throw off your immune system, your digestion, your gut microbiome, your inflammatory markers, your neurotransmitters, your blood pressure, detoxification, blood flow, so many different things that truly do create all of these different symptoms that we see in women, like poor sleep and moods and periods and energy and snappiness, anxiety, chronic pain, digestive issues, IBS. All of these things and so much more are due to this idea that our nervous system is on high alert and producing way too much stress hormone way too much of the time.
Yeah, I kind of want to, exactly. And I love that you said steal, like it steals
Mm-hmm.
hormones. I want to dive into that a little bit more because I don't think women really understand um, what that means. Like we're already experiencing lower levels of hormones as we age, especially as we
Mm-hmm.
enter peri and menopause. So when you say steal, can we dive into that a little bit? Like what is actually happening when we're stressed out?
Totally. So our brain's always scanning your environment looking for dangers, right? So it might be a news headline, it might be that we're running late, it might be a teenager yelling at us, it might be lack of boundaries, it might be social media. Like there's so many things now, right, that keep our brain kind of in this like, oh, that was a little scary, right? And so when it's doing that, it's saying, oh, we might need to prepare to fight, flight, freeze, fawn. Those are our four trauma responses. And when it does that, it sends a whole bunch of blood and oxygen to your muscles, your pupils, your heart to make sure that you're prepared for these situations. To do that, though, especially and time again during the day, it takes a lot of resources. So it uses a ton of minerals like B vitamins and magnesium. It uses a lot of glucose. So when we see people's A1Cs and, hypoglycemia going off, that can be why. it also uses hormones. So our body can decide, oh, we're going to ovulate and we're going to produce this amazing progesterone and help our menstrual cycle. Or it's going to be like, oh my God, we need cortisol quick. Let's get everything we can on board. And so it will steal your progesterone, your testosterone, your DHEA from doing other functions to go into cortisol. So when we hear that, it's called the pregnenolone steal, which is more of a scientific term for it. But it's basically just saying your body's in danger. It's in fight or flight. We need all the things we can get. So it's not going to go toward these other functions. It's going to go to stress.
Yeah, and that's not good because we're already, like
Right.
I said, we're already struggling with
Yes.
lower hormones as it
Totally.
is. Yeah. So what's the first thing you help your clients with in this regard with the nervous system and the pregnenolone steal, the cortisol, high cortisol? Where do you start?
So I like to think about stress as like a reservoir. And I like to think about it as there's kind of three components. So, number one, when we get symptoms, right? So we get insomnia, we get anxiety, we get a chronic pain, we get a stomach ache, whatever. That's your body's way of communicating to you that this reservoir is overflowing. It's full at capacity. Now it's overflowing. Your body's yelling at you through symptoms to say, hey, slow down, reduce stress. We need more safety instead of danger. And so when we think about this reservoir that's overflowing, there's sort of three ways that we can sort of help create more capacity and resilience in there. Number one, we can prevent what's going in there to some extent, right? So worry, fear, self-criticism, pressure, those are the types of thoughts that really create the lens at which we view life through, right? So you and I are working right now. If we had pressure on us, right, we'd be like putting all this pressure to say, like, you got to say the right thing, you got to do the right thing, this email that's coming in is really urgent. That's where pressure comes from. And you can see that, like, even that lens is just simple email coming in can put this pressure, this urgency, this sort of fear and danger around even just getting an email. And so those are kind of different thoughts. I think the phone, I think technology use, I think the social media and news, a lot of the things on there create a lot of fear, a lot of judgment, a lot of shame, a lot of comparison, those types of things, which tend to create things going into that reservoir in the first place. And when I'm working with patients, those are the types of things that I work through first. They're kind of like the lower hanging fruit. So, like, don't check your phone first thing in the morning. Get into your day in your own four walls without inviting the rest of the world and all the things in the rest of the world into your safest place that you have. Maybe look at, instead of when you're picking up your kids and sitting there for 2 minutes, instead of picking up that phone and just numbnessly scrolling, maybe sit there idle and just kind of focus on your breath or focus on the trees rustling. These things are really, really small and feel really insignificant, but over time create such a huge difference in the way that we live our life. The second thing is more counterbalancing that stress. So instead of, we get the pressure thoughts and the self-criticism, we just buy into it and just keep going down the path of cortisol, adrenaline, fight or flight. Instead of doing that, realizing, okay, these are pressure thoughts, these are worry thoughts, kind of do a catch and release type of theory with them. We used
I
to
like
do
that.
this. Yeah, we're wired to do this. This is what's preserved our life and kept us safe for so long. It's maladaptive. It doesn't work. We're not going to buy into them anymore. We can't control what thoughts we get, but we can control what we buy into. Along with counterbalancing it, I think we spend all of our life avoiding the negative, trying to fix ourselves, feel better. Instead of having that mindset of avoidance, focus on the things that feel good. So I tell my patients simple things like paying attention to the rise and fall of your chest. Super simple. It feels really grounding if you can just stop for a second. Again, the leaves rustling, the snow falling, rain falling, sunshine on your face, hot water, soft blankets, the surface that you're sitting under. All of these things have a really calming, more present, mindful type of experience for us. But we don't really ever get them because we just mow over them, right? We don't pay attention. And so we can start to counterbalance the stress by focusing on these things with saying, we're actually really safe. And we're feeling these things. We're being present. We're breathing slow. We're moving at a slower pace. We're not racing around our entire life. We have less tabs open. You can start to really give yourself messages of safety in this way by slowing down and paying attention to these types of things. And then the third thing that I think is really important for all of us is to do emotional processing. So in our life, we have been told over and over and over that emotions are intense, they're societally unacceptable, they're dangerous, they're scary, they're all these things. And so we're really good at repressing them. We gaslight ourselves by saying, oh, stop thinking about that. You should be grateful. Not a big deal. Get over it. Why would you feel that way? Somebody probably has told you in your life to stop feeling certain ways. And so we repress that. And that comes out as all the symptoms that we've talked about, plus things like sugar cravings, phone addiction, gambling, alcohol, shopping, needing to scroll our phone when we're sitting idle. Like all of those things is just your body's way of avoiding what we're truly feeling and sitting with the pain or the symptoms that we're having. And so I think that I have a specific kind of process for this, but I teach people to sit with the discomfort and teach your brain that those things are safe. They're totally a normal part of the human experience. And we have to change the way that our brain views them, or we're going to continue to just overflow that reservoir through repressed emotions over and over and over.
Wow. Yeah. It's as you were speaking, what popped into my head too is it's almost as if our modern day society has adopted new ways to feel stressed out as we've moved out of some of the traditional
Yeah.
stressors like clean water, finding enough food, having heat, a safe place to lay your head at night. There could be war going on. We've traded some of those experiences and survival issues, things that used to stress people out hundreds of years ago, for modern day stressors. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Are we doing that much better? I'm not sure we are. You just outlined
No.
the whole list.
Yeah. And I think that, our ancestors even, I think they got reprieves from some of the stress.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
there were certainly stressors. And I think that's the way that our brain is supposed to function. It's supposed to function in a way of like fight or flight. It's scary and dangerous, but then we're supposed to get a complete resolution of the stress cycle. And it's supposed to let everything come back down and your hormones to be produced and your gut to relax and your brain to change its chemistry. But now I don't think that most of us ever get a complete resolution of a stress cycle. I think we
Yeah.
just start the day on fire and just continue to feed into it over and over and over. And, unfortunately, I like to keep things super positive and give people things they can do. But I will say, you probably agree with this, like in today's society with food and lifestyle and stress management, you really have to do something different than like the societal norms to
Yeah.
manage this. Our societal norms are in a trajectory that create chronic symptoms, chronic disease, all kinds of things if you just follow along with what everyone else is doing. And I think that it stinks that it's like that. It makes me sad, honestly, because no one's not sitting on their phone in a waiting room or waiting for something. No one's cooking food. Our society doesn't yield time for meal preparation and dinner and things like that. The world just keeps going, the kids' activities. We don't have time for things like that. And it's yielded to just the norm being drive-throughs and, to push ourselves and go to burnout and keep grinding. And that's creating the state that we're in right now. And so to do something different, if you want to age well, if you want to prevent disease, you want to feel energetic and sleep well, you kind of have to do what society's not doing to do
Yeah.
it.
I heard a leader that I follow and adore the other day say something along I'm going to totally butcher a quote because I always do that, but something along the lines of the people that don't have time have a lack of intimacy. And what I translate that to as in the conversation we're having right now is an intimacy with relating to how you were saying like be present before,
Mm-hmm.
like intimacy with nature, with the moments around you, with your feelings, with your thoughts. And so I think this all comes full circle to what you said is that we're all in an avoidance in a way, and I wonder, do we actually create this busyness, this lack of time, so that we do not have to face
Yeah.
those, sit with those feelings and really kind of be intimate with those moments?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting topic. And, every single time that I hop on a call with a one-on-one patient, I'm always like, how's life going? And I mean, I say 98% of the time, so busy. And
So
I'm
busy.
I mean, my life feels busy too. I get it. But I'm just like, what are we doing? Why is it like this?
Well, to your point, actually, and since we're talking to people that want to shift to make this shift,
Hmm.
someone once told me that instead of saying, I'm so busy, what if you said, my life is so full?
Yeah.
And you turned it into, look at all the things I get to do. Look at all the things I'm blessed with. And I think those little shifts in our mindset
Hmm.
can shift us away from, and I go back to this analogy that a lot of experts use of like the tiger, like being stressed out is like in the old days, ancestors used to be chased by a tiger. And so you had that stress response.
Yeah.
And now, as you were mentioning, the email from your boss, the to do list, the grocery, store, like all these things are the tiger
Yeah.
chasing us
Yeah.
all the
All
time. Yes, exactly. But if we start to see like these aren't things I have to do, these are things I get to do, maybe our bodies won't feel like the tiger's chasing us as much, at least.
Totally. I do talk a lot about intention, right? So I think that stress comes from our perception of it, kind of back to like those lenses of pressure, self criticism, worry, fear. And I think about, just basic things like, um, I'll throw myself under the bus. Like one of the things that we're dealing with right now in my family is my sixth grader moved to middle school, and it's just been a big transition for him, for us. And helping him with homework, right, can be, it's, again, to throw myself under the bus, it's one of my most stressful times of the day. Absolutely. I just feel myself like ramping up. I feel irritated and I hate it. And I've like really thought about it and like tried to work myself through it of you're in fight or flight because that's what the symptoms are, and like why. And it's because I feel I'm a recovering perfectionist, absolutely, and I have recovered in a lot of areas in my own life, but I've recognized as my kids get older there's like this fear, because perfectionism is about shame and fear, that like he won't succeed, and am I not setting him up, why is he not having this like attitude to work harder at school, and it's way way deeper for me than him just getting schoolwork done. And so it puts me, into this fight or flight because my intention or my mindset around it is, why isn't he doing a better job here? Why doesn't he have the motivation to do a better job? All of that versus just simply my husband sits down and is just like, I'm helping my kid with homework. That's as far deep as it goes for him. And so he doesn't get into fight or flight, and he's just like, yeah, I mean, he's probably going to fail sometimes. We have to let him. That's how he learns, and we move on. But to me, there's like so much more wrapped into that. And I think other, email, right? Some people are like, oh, like I got an email, I'll get around to that, not a big deal. For those people who are type A and don't like to be behind the eight ball, like that email's urgent. We got to get it out. We got to figure out what's going on. We got to do what it says. And so I think that our mindset behind every single thing that we do is how we're viewing it and perceiving that thing.
Yeah, and it has to do with whether you're living in the future or the present, as you were alluding to before. Like, if
Yeah.
you're worried about if am I going to help my son with his homework enough that he gets a good grade, that he does well in
Right.
this class, that he does well this year, gets, into college. Like
Right.
you're constantly thinking into the future instead of being like, okay, I just need to help him with 10 math problems and understand, algebra or whatever it is. So by the way, I'm the same. And I think it's a struggle that especially women, I think in general, I'm stereotyping, but I think we feel that more because we're very nurturing by
Yeah.
nature, more so than maybe a man.
Mhm.
I know that this is a generalization, but I
Yeah.
think recognizing that is also helpful, knowing that like we want to do so much for others, but then realizing, okay, well, I'm also just human. There's
Right.
only one of me. I haven't cloned myself yet.
Yeah. Totally. Absolutely. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's such a great thing, is just thinking about mindset, and some of it goes deep, right? Like I have to look at my own triggers and be like, okay, well, you're a perfectionist and you also like don't want that for your kid either, because that was a miserable experience to go through. And so it's just constantly being gentle and compassionate with yourself, because right, we don't want to shame ourselves. That shame creates a lot of nervous system dysregulation. In fact, research has shown that's the number one emotion that does it, um, is shame.
Wow.
So the antidote to shame is self-compassion.
Yeah.
So, I walk myself through it, and I've identified it. It took me a few months to identify like what was actually happening, but I have. And, just sharing like, okay, well, this was your experience, it's okay. We'll work through it. Being a little bit more compassionate about the thing instead of like, God, why are you like this? Like, you need to change and fix this. That again creates a lot of urgency and fixing, and you're wrong, which also jacks up our nervous system too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I agree completely. And I think having the right coach could be really helpful too, as
Yeah.
I'm sure your patients would agree.
Yeah.
But for those of the women that are just, listening to this podcast, wondering like, well, if I were to just take a couple steps on my own, like maybe we can talk about some actionable steps that people could take right now.
Yeah.
Maybe it's mindset, maybe it's biohacks, maybe it's, food or fitness related. Do you want to dive into
Yeah.
some things that, yeah, let's do that.
Okay. So when we think about stress, we can think about it as physical, mental, emotional. So I think, um, number one, looking at your life more objectively, and this is going to take some time where you're not running around with your head on fire, but sitting down and doing a bird's eye view of your life of like, where is stress coming from? Sometimes I tell my patients to journal about like what's disturbing the peace. Sometimes I'm just like, let's look around, and this is what I help them do too. And sometimes, you mentioned food, right? So food's a big one. Food, if we're eating in irregular intervals, we're eating nutrient void foods, we're not eating enough protein, and macronutrients aren't balanced, that's also going to stress our body out, right? So particularly people who identify as you and I have a little bit more type A little bit more hypervigilant type of individuals, nutrition's so important. Like if I don't start my day off with a really balanced breakfast of 30 grams of protein, some carbohydrates, because carbohydrates actually lower cortisol levels. And some of us need that, some of us don't need that. I need that in the morning. Um, and then a little bit of healthy fat, I can tell for the entire day. My sleep is off even that night. So I think setting in the stage with nutrition is so important, of regular intervals of eating, not skipping meals, balanced meals, trying to get in as many micronutrients that you can through fruits and vegetables, lean proteins, healthy fats. Because remember, when you're in more fight or flight or you are under more stress, your body burns through those nutrients quick. So
Yeah.
if you can just give your body at least what it needs through nutrition, I think that's a huge help, right? We tend to either skip meals and we're busy and things are crazy, or we drink too much caffeine, or we overeat sugar, or those things are all going to contribute to sort of this dysregulation.
I see that as the number one thing I wish I could change for every stressed out woman is to like they think intermittent fasting or skipping breakfast or whatever you call it is going to help them get to wherever they're trying to get to, either whether it's lose weight or I'm not sure what their goal is, but that is the number one. If you're stressed out, which I think is the
Oh
majority
my
of
gosh.
women in their 40s and 50s, and yeah,
Yeah.
it's like please don't skip breakfast.
Yeah. In fact, even with fasting, like I think like I encourage my patients to do like a daily 12. I think that that's like a great amount of time to get some digestive rest and some break from insulin. I think that that's great for you. It does always depend on like the state of someone's nervous system. If we're in like stage 3 and 4 burnout, where we're just like really burning the candle, eating every 3 hours is important. But if you're in like 1 or 2 and just kind of stressed out, but you're feeling pretty good, eating 3 balanced meals a day is great. So even with fasting, um, if somebody goes like 14, or occasionally once in a while wants to do a 16-hour fast, and their adrenals, their nervous system can handle it, I much prefer them to do it at night, at those
Mhm.
hours after dinner, than in the morning. I always think
Yep.
setting the stage in the morning will help you. And there's so much research to show 30 grams of protein for breakfast sets protein muscle synthesis and your nervous system and your stress response, your circadian rhythm, all of it in a good place.
Well, and not eating before bedtime actually is a form of reducing stress. Like if you have a bigger window before bed, the way you're not eating as opposed to eating right up until bedtime, you're actually removing some stress from your digestive system and your liver processes, right? So it could be
Yeah, for
helpful.
sure. And I think
Yeah.
some of my patients who, again, are in that like really stressed out time, again, carbohydrates can lower cortisol. So sometimes I use that as a strategy. I have some people who like to wake up and eat in the middle of the night.
Okay. Yep.
So sometimes we'll, I don't do naked carbs, right? So maybe like a banana and some nut butter or something like that. So it really is all super
Did
individualized.
you say
But
naked carbs?
yeah,
I
I
love
heard that
that.
from somewhere and I was like, oh, that's a great one. Just
I
like
love that.
carbs without protein. Um,
I'm gonna steal that.
yeah. So I do think it's individualized, but in general, yes, I definitely agree that eating before bed can impact sleep. It slows down your body's having to digest food when it wants to be doing other
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just to sum, like basically what we're saying is if you are going to shorten your eating window, it's better to shorten on the tail end of the day.
Mhm.
Like start off with a solid breakfast and then close down your kitchen a little bit earlier than, bedtime if you're going to shorten that window.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Totally.
And I love that you also said, by the way, it's dependent on the individual because everyone is different. Some people need a little bit more carbohydrates, some people need a little bit less.
Yeah.
And I guess that's why, you and I have a job because
Right.
people need help figuring that out.
Have you heard of Jade Teta? Do you know who that is?
No.
He's a naturopathic doctor. And he's a guy who talks very in depth about the metabolism, but he talks about this idea of your schmeck is in check, and schmeck is basically sleep, hunger, mood, energy, cravings.
I
So
love
those
that.
5 things, sleep, hunger, mood, energy, cravings, if those 5 things are in a good place with what you're doing, your metabolism's doing a good job. It's handling whatever you're doing. If you start to notice that you start to eat lower carbohydrates and your sleep is messed up, or you start to intermittent fast and you eat and then you crash with your energy, or you're craving sugar all day, or any of those things, that means that we gotta go back to the drawing board. Either your food's off in terms of macros, micros, timing of food, amounts of food in general. Something's off with that, and we want to fix it so that that's all in check.
I love that.
Yeah,
I'll have to
it's
go
a
look
good
them up.
analogy. I can't take credit for it, but it really does work.
I love it. So we kind of talked about food at length, but what about fitness? Do you think people overdo it sometimes when they're in that stress, that high stress state, and they're like, got to get my hit workout in, and then I got to go run a mile or 3 miles or 10 miles or whatever it is?
Yeah,
Maybe they're overdoing it.
feel like very few women unfortunately get like the right amount of activity, right? Like I know it's really interesting, I have to say, in the online world and like my business, obviously I attract clients who are interested in their health and they're over exercising. And then in my personal life, the moms that I know don't exercise at all. Like it's very rare that I find a mom in my personal life that actually goes to the gym or lifts weights. Like barely ever happens.
Well,
So I feel like people are either on one end of the extreme or the other. So in my opinion, and I'm interested to hear what you think. I think women in their 40s, 3 or 4 times of 30 minutes, 40 minutes of strength training, like good quality strength training, where like you're lifting, your muscles are tired, you feel like you're doing something, you're progressing, right? You're lifting heavier weights over time or doing more reps or whatever. I think that is where we should be, in addition to just moving our body and getting steps. And I don't think it has to be rucking or like fast power walks. It can be if you want it to be, but I think just like moving our body, getting that neat activity is really important. And so, yes, I do feel like the people who have a really stressful day and they got to go burn it off with that hit, their body is wanting, that's another form of avoidance. Their body doesn't want to process. They're too uncomfortable feeling that. And so they go burn it off in the gym. I heard somebody recently describe this as like stress math. So when you have a stressful day, don't add more stress to your body with intense exercise or fasting or high carbohydrate dinner and no protein. Like we want to reduce stress in our body overall. And so you want to look at like the hormetic stressors of like fasting, low carb days, hit workouts, running, those types of things, and balance out like the emotional external stresses too and internal stresses. Does that make sense?
absolutely. I think for some, I think it's very individual and
Yeah.
it depends on your background. Like I was a college Division 1 athlete, and so for me to take a day off is really hard. Very
Yeah.
hard mentally and also physically. Like my body almost craves. It's almost like an addiction.
Mm-hmm.
But I do know, and I'm just speaking from my own experience, there are days where I should take it off. I should not push my body. And it's really hard, as you said, to
Mhm.
pull back and not do that. And I think
It is.
there's also the reverse, like, right? Some women, as you mentioned, are very used to not doing anything. And so to add in some things,
Mm.
that's stressful for them. So
Yeah.
finding the happy medium.
Yeah, I do think that. And to your point, I in my 20s ran marathons and like loved the runner's high. And
Yeah.
then I switched over eventually to like high hit workouts like T25 and Insanity, and like those did it for me too. I was like, okay, my body's in the ground now. And
Yeah.
so it's been like such a journey for me of actually like weaning off of exercise and being able to fully listen to like, where do you actually feel good? Because there's all this noise of like, I mean, I did a ton of beach body programs like in my early 30s too.
Yeah.
I forget all the names of them, but did so many where it was exercising, 6 or 7 days a week. And I was, trying to lose baby weight at certain points. And then always had like the diet mentality and all of that stuff. And so it's been a long journey. It's been like a decade of me trying to figure out exactly where I feel good, what amount, what volume, like what exercises, all of that stuff. And I think it is so individualized, but you just think like, well, more is better. And so you start to just go for it, or then you get that kind of sweaty, heart ripping type of exercise, and you do feel good after that. It feels accomplishing, especially for those type A perfectionistic people who need that. It feels great. And so now, I'm at like 3 or 4 days a week now after reading so much research. Like that's where I've like landed. And I actually do just with the kids, with our schedule, that is what feels good for me to do that, even just logistically.
Right, because also on that same note, if you tell a woman like you need to work out 6 days a week and they have, let's say they have kids, they have a job, they have other obligations, that in itself is stressful trying to fit
Yeah.
it in. So I'm like you with my clients, we've pretty much I find 3 to 4 days, especially if it's like strength training, focused on that. 3 to 4 days is a kind of a really good spot for most women. And
Mhm.
then the other days, I find things like walking or gardening or something where you're moving your body, but it's a little more gentle and you're still getting fresh air outside, that kind of that release with the I say go connect with the sunshine or the outdoors every day if you can, but don't necessarily kill yourself to do it. Like you don't need to run 26 miles to
No,
connect with the sun.
no. Definitely not. I know. I think my husband actually still does Ironmans and marathons. He's like very immersed still in training and meeting goals in that regard and stuff. And there's been so much of me that's since becoming a mom that's been like, oh, I'll get back to it eventually. And every year that passes, I'm just like, no. Like
We
it's
have the same husband, by
yeah,
the way.
it's hard.
Not literally, people listening, not literally, but
I know. So yeah, not literally. But yeah, it's been also, I don't know if you felt like this, especially as a D1 athlete, like it has been a little hard to be like, oh, you and ran 20 miles this morning and I like cooked pancakes for the kids.
well,
Uh,
I think that's the journey of women, especially as we enter the perimenopause and menopause phase. I think that's the emotional journey is like we
mhm.
are the same person, but we're also not the same person. We're transitioning and we have different responsibilities and obligations. And then what it looks like to be there for ourselves looks very different. We may have less time, we may have less energy. So it's for every woman, I think there's that transition. It doesn't have to be less. Like you don't have to cut yourself off or not put yourself as a priority. I just think it changes.
I think so too. And I just physically, emotionally, I cannot imagine doing that training now. I just
Yeah.
can't. I would be a wreck.
Well, I think men can compartmentalize a little bit more than women. And so, like, and I would love to hear what women listening have to say about this. I
Yeah,
wish we had a polling tool here.
I
But,
know.
like, my husband also trains for half marathons and whatnot. And he so easily just says, well, I'm going to put all my other responsibilities, like,
Yeah.
dinner, groceries, like, there's clothes all over the floor, laundry to be done. They don't seem to think about that. They can easily just walk out the door and go on their bike ride or their swim or their run.
Yeah.
Whereas women have all those things constant, and that's a form of stress, right, Allie?
Yeah.
Like this constant to-do list in our head of things that just it's hard to let go of.
It is hard. Yeah, and I think every season of our body changing, our kids growing up, right? Like every season's just so different. And that's been kind of my own journey for the last 12 or 13 years now, is just thinking about that. And I look at my husband a lot, actually, especially in this stage of more like perimenopause. I'm like, what must it feel like to like feel the same virtually every day, right? Because our
Yeah.
hormones are changing so fast week by week that like our weeks are so different. And, even scientifically, weeks 1 and 3 of our menstrual cycle, we just can handle less stress. We need more carbohydrates. We need lower intense exercise, because our body's either bleeding or building progesterone. And then weeks 2 and 4, we tend to be a little bit more resilient to things and can handle more of those things. But I just look at him and I'm like I'd probably have to plan these things around like my period. And I didn't when I was in my 20s, really. But like now I'd be like, well, I'm not going to want to run a 20-mile run the day before I get my period. That's going to feel miserable. And that's just like not something I have to contend with.
Yeah, there's so many things that we as women deal with as these things change. And then there's the question of like, do we add hormones back? Do we have to deal with a thyroid that's, maybe on the fritz? Do
Yeah.
we have to, change our diet, even our diet and our fitness? We were just talking about those two things. Those change as well. I feel like my personal opinion is we have to be a little bit more on it with our diet
Yeah.
and like our sleep and our stress now in our 40s, 50s, and beyond, because our bodies are less forgiving. It won't tolerate,
Yeah.
missing a meal or not getting enough protein or maybe binging on sugar or wine or something.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
I think
Yeah.
so too. I tell people that all the time, women that are like, well, gosh, I eat like the same as I did, back when I was this weight and I want to get back there. And I'm like, I did not make the rules, but we just have less window for error here
Yeah.
now. I can certainly feel it in my body, as well. Just way less window for error. And sometimes I'm like, gosh, and I live with 2 boys and then my husband who trains for marathons. And so they can eat with the best of them and eat 300 grams of carbohydrates a day and just go for it. And it's hard. I think that's also such a struggle for women because, like, I cannot eat with my family. I mean, I eat the same foods
Yeah.
and we cook family dinner, but I can't, like, eat with them.
You're not eating like them.
No,
Yeah.
no,
I know.
certainly not. I would be way different than I am now if I did that. And I think that's hard, right? Because you're out for dinner and you're like sharing food with your husband, or, my husband will have 2 or 3 beers. Like, no, you just can't do that stuff anymore. And I did it in my 20s, but you just can't do it anymore.
Yeah, I agree. The one thing I do like about the modern day, I guess you could call it healthcare,
Yeah.
welfare, is there's so many biohacking tools that we can use to enhance we are living longer, I believe, but maybe not a higher quality of life. And so I talk to a lot of women in their, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and they're loving these biohacking tools to enhance
Yeah.
the base of what the foundation of what they're doing with their food, their movement, their sleep, and their stress.
Yeah.
So I don't know if do you have any favorite biohacking tools that you love that either you use personally or with your clients?
Yeah. I'm trying to think of them. There are so many of them. Like, I love infrared light. I
Yes.
think that's amazing, like a loom box or something like that. I've heard people heal their thyroids with that, and just, cellular function, anti-aging, wrinkles, all of that stuff too. So I think that that is great for us. I actually think that like a little bit of carb cycling in a healthy metabolism, healthy nervous system person is really helpful. I think it creates some metabolic flexibility, and you don't have to go
Mhm.
crazy with like really a ton of carbs one day and then barely any, but just like cycle a little bit gently of, I think, do you know Gabrielle Lyon?
Mhm.
Okay,
I love
so
her.
I like her and I trust her, and she recommends women mostly eat between about 130 and 150 grams of carbohydrates. An average woman, again, individual little. And so that's what I generally recommend to my patients and myself as well. But I think that, again, on those menstrual cycle weeks of 2 and 4, could we do one day of like 50 or 60 and just kind of teach your body to remember to burn fat as well as that glucose in there? And then obviously she says this, and I highly agree, and there's research to support this, but women are just under muscled.
Yeah.
And I think muscle mass is the fountain of youth for so many of us. It helps our metabolism, which metabolic disease, everyone, again, kind of like the stress is just like, yeah, okay, whatever. But like, even if you're not going to get, type 2 diabetes, like cancer is a metabolic disease, heart disease, all the things that we die from as we age are metabolic diseases. And so, protecting your metabolism with muscle and walking and protein and micronutrients and fiber, those are like the best biohacking, and they're so boring.
It's so boring, but it's like the
So
best investment in your health for future. It's like you're putting it away into a bank account as an investment. The more muscle you can build, the better you're going to be long term. That's like one of the best biohacks, I think, is just start at like getting 100, on average, 100 grams minimum protein per day, which
yeah,
roughly is about 30 to 35 grams per meal. So
think
not
about
impossible.
like my
What?
they probably ate 20 grams of protein per day
Yeah.
when they were, in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. Like I think back, and then they all had osteoporosis and osteopenia. They broke hips, which has a super high mortality rate. And with all the things we've talked about, I do have so much hope for this generation that, like you said, we're going to live quality lives.
Yeah.
I hope. I think there's so many things out there for us now, and there's so much more education to know what to do, that I have a lot of.
Yeah. Instead of thinking of a lifespan, you want to think of a health span. Because
Yeah.
I'm like, who wants to be 85 and can't like get out of their chair and do the things they love? Like, I want to be doing things that I love outside physically until I'm 99, whatever I'm allowed to live, the life I'm blessed with. I want to be active.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're one of those women, these are the things you have to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think HRT, we didn't really get into that, but I think there's a lot of promise there for
Yeah.
certain women. Not everyone's a great candidate, but there are a lot of great candidates out there. And I think estrogen hormone replacement therapy, with progesterone has a really lot of promise for preventative health care.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we have a lot of things that are coming down the pikes that we're changing the trajectory. We're realizing medicine can keep us alive for a really long time, but
Yeah.
it's not great to just spend your life at the
Yeah.
doctor.
What's the quality of life? There's one more biohack I wanted to mention. Maybe you use this. I love it and it's not expensive. Is I got some blue light blocking.
Yes, yes,
They're actually the ones that I usually wear glasses and they actually clip on over my glasses. So when the sun goes down, I put those on and I swear that has drastically changed my cortisol levels. That and getting out for first light in the morning, those two things have made a huge difference, I think.
yeah, yeah. Those are two really great things too. I didn't think about that, but yeah, I think blue light blocking glasses. I have some too. I try to use it
Yeah.
at work too.
I even got a pair from I have a 11-year-old and he thinks it's cool to wear them,
That's
but
awesome.
it helps him sleep better.
Have you noticed with him?
Yeah, I have.
I'll have to get some for my
He's
kid.
the only one in my family I can get, besides myself, to consistently wear it. My older son and my husband would look at me like, "What is wrong with you? You look weird." But I don't care. I'm like, well,
Yep.
my body likes this.
Yeah. Totally.
I
Yes.
was-
I forgot about that. I do use blue light blocking glasses too.
yeah.
Yeah.
So just to kind of sum up what we've talked about and like come full circle, I think that what you said so many things that women could take and use and learn from. And I think just recognizing that stress plays a huge role in our overall health, but especially our hormone health, especially in peri and postmenopause.
Hmm.
I think that's probably for most women the first place you could start
Yeah.
if you're wondering like, okay, well, perimenopause or menopause hit me like a truck. I don't feel the same. I'm struggling. I'm on the struggle bus. Like, where do I start? I mean, Allie, I think the place you start is what you were talking about is I like recognizing stress and trying to manage it.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yeah, totally. Insulin, cortisol, and adrenaline are our three like master hormones, air quote, and they dictate everything. So absolutely. And I think a great place to start, like I know we kind of talked about this a little bit, but figuring out where it's coming from.
Yeah.
Where is your stress coming from? What is disturbing your peace in your life? And starting with one thing at a time. Is it the phone first thing in the morning? Is it you swallowing your words and not being able to voice your opinion in your house? Is it your boss? Is it email that just sets you through the roof? Like, there's strategies for all of it. Sometimes it's a perception change, sometimes it's a mindset shift, sometimes it's an actual tactical thing. Okay, put your phone on do not disturb, check your email twice a day instead of just ongoing every day. um, all things that I work on with my clients all the time, of just basic things of like, how can we get your brain to feel safer in your world?
Yeah. And I might sound a little controversial by saying this, but I would say women should start with this before they go into like menopause hormone therapy or
Oh yeah,
HRT hormone replacement therapy because you can do those things first, the hormone replacement therapy, but it won't be as effective, and you won't have a foundation of health to get you through that health span versus lifespan.
totally. I agree. I always say this with HRT, it's becoming so much more popular, which is great. Like I said, there's really great benefits to it, but it's not an or thing. It's not like,
Yeah.
let's work on nutrition and stress and the natural air quote stuff or to do HRT. It's an and. You have to
And
do all of it.
I could not agree more. Well, Allie, if people want to work with you or just learn more about you, where do they find you?
So you can come over to my website at alliedamron.com, or Instagram. It's the same place, Allie Damron. Or I share lots of information like this on my podcast at the Allie Damron Show as well.
Love it. I'll include all those links in the show notes and women can go find you and check out your stuff and maybe work with you. So
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
this has been a pleasure. Thanks for coming on.
My pleasure. Thanks.